The incessant pounding jolted me awake. 3 a.m. My phone screen blazed with frantic messages from neighbors. Don't answer your door. Someone's trying to break in. Heart racing, I peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but the banging continued from inside my walls. As I backed away, my foot crunched on something. Shards of my mirror lay scattered on the floor, reflecting a figure standing behind me. I spun around, finding only my darkened apartment. That's when I realized, in this building, our greatest fears weren't just in our heads anymore. They were becoming real. I'd moved into Evergreen Towers 3 months ago, desperate for a fresh start after my divorce. The sleek, eco-friendly complex seemed perfect, all gleaming surfaces and promises of a community-focused living experience. If only I'd known what that really meant. At first, everything was normal. I'd nod to neighbors in the elevator, chat at the mailboxes. Evelyn from 4B would join me for coffee in the communal lounge. Mr. Grayson, the retired chemist from 6A, would regale anyone who'd listen with tales from his globe-trotting days. It was nice. Ordinary. Exactly what I needed. Then the dream started. It began subtly. Evelyn mentioned having trouble sleeping. Mr. Grayson grumbled about nightmares. I'd wake up feeling drained, vague memories of unsettling dreams slipping away like mist. We blamed stress, city noise, anything but the truth. But then came that night. The night of the red door. The night we all shared the same nightmare. The next morning, the community chat exploded. Everyone had seen it, that blood-red door at the end of an impossibly long corridor. Everyone had felt the presence behind it, malevolent and hungry. Everyone had jolted awake, hearts pounding, a scream caught in their throats. It's got to be a coincidence, I muttered, scrolling through message after message describing the exact scene that had haunted my sleep. But deep down, I knew better. I met Evelyn in the lobby, her usually bright eyes now shadowed with exhaustion. This isn't normal, Alex, she whispered, glancing nervously at the other residents huddled in small groups, all wearing the same haunted expression. Something's wrong with this building. I wanted to disagree, to find a rational explanation. But as I opened my mouth, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The lobby seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. For a split second, I swore I saw that red door just at the edge of my vision. But when I turned to look, there was nothing but the usual beige wallpaper. We need to figure this out, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Before it gets worse. Little did I know, it was already too late. The next few weeks blurred into a haze of sleepless nights and increasingly bizarre days. I started documenting everything, hoping to find a pattern, an explanation, anything to make sense of our shared madness. It wasn't just the dreams anymore. People were changing. I'd catch neighbors staring blankly at walls, muttering about red doors. The shadows under Evelyn's eyes grew darker, her hands trembling as she clutched her ever-present coffee mug. Even Mr. Grayson's cheerful demeanor cracked, revealing a paranoid edge I'd never seen before. I couldn't shake the feeling that it all started with the recent renovations. The management had been vague about the details, touting some new eco-friendly materials. On a hunch, I started digging. Late one night, as I pored over building schematics I'd borrowed from the maintenance room, my phone buzzed. It was Evelyn. Alex, I can't stay awake anymore. But I'm terrified to sleep. Can you come over? I found her huddled on her couch, lights blazing in every room. I saw something, she whispered, eyes wild. When I was half asleep. A figure, watching me. But when I turned on the lights, a chill ran down my spine. I'd seen it too, those shadow figures lurking just out of sight. I'd convinced myself it was just sleep deprivation. Now, I wasn't so sure. The next day, I cornered Aisha, our building manager. Her dismissive attitude crumbled when I mentioned the new insulation. It's not my fault, she hissed, glancing around nervously. They said it was safe. Experimental, yes, but safe. Experimental. The word echoed in my mind as I raced to Mr. Grayson's apartment. If anyone could make sense of this, it was him. We pored over the chemical composition of the new materials, Mr. Grayson's face growing paler by the minute. This compound, he said, pointing to a complex formula, when heated, it could potentially release a potent hallucinogen. But surely they wouldn't. His words were cut off by a scream from the hallway. We rushed out to find our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, clawing at the wall. "The door," she shrieked. "It's here. Can't you see it?" But there was no door. Only the same beige wallpaper, now streaked with Mrs. Chen's blood. As panic spread through the building, we gathered for an emergency meeting. The truth came out in a rush of angry voices and tearful confessions. Our home, our safe haven, had been turned into a twisted experiment. The eco-friendly insulation was releasing a mind-altering compound, turning our nights into shared terror and our days into waking nightmares. As accusations flew and people demanded action, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, behind a hastily erected temporary wall in the lobby, was a hint of red. The door from our dreams, hidden in plain sight all along. I tried to point it out, to make others see, but my voice was lost in the chaos. And then I realized the horrifying truth. The door wasn't just a hallucination. It was real, a physical manifestation of our collective fears. And it was opening. They say we're safe now. The insulation's been removed, the air cleared, and the building thoroughly inspected. But the nightmares haven't stopped. Sometimes, I still catch glimpses of that red door, always just out of reach. In the dead of night, I swear I can hear my neighbors screaming, though they deny it come morning. Are we still dreaming together? Or has something fundamental changed in us, a shared trauma that can never be undone? As I sit here, watching the shadows in my apartment grow longer, I can't shake the feeling that in this complex, none of us will ever truly sleep soundly again. The logbook stares at me, its pages blank and accusing. I should be recording ship movements, weather patterns, maintenance logs. Instead, I'm scribbling frantically about the footsteps I keep hearing on the stairs. About the whispers that seem to come from the walls themselves. About the face I saw in the lighthouse mirror gaunt, wild-eyed, and definitely not mine. I've been alone on this godforsaken island for 37 days now. At least, I think I have. But as I watch my pen moving across the paper, forming words I don't remember writing, I'm starting to wonder if I was ever really alone at all. As the weeks dragged on, my grip on reality began to slip. I started misplacing things in my logbook, the spare keys, even my own damn shoes. At first, I chalked it up to forgetfulness, a side effect of the isolation. But then I began to wonder, was I really alone on this island? The thought took root, growing like a weed in my mind. I found myself searching the lighthouse, room by room, convinced I'd find evidence of an intruder. I set up makeshift alarms, tin cans strung together with fishing line, propped against doors and windows. The constant clatter whenever the wind picked up only added to my growing paranoia. Then the storm hit. It came out of nowhere, a howling beast that shook the lighthouse to its foundations. The power went out, plunging me into darkness. I scrambled to keep the light running manually, my hands shaking as I worked the ancient backup system. The wind screamed through every crack and crevice, and in its voice, I swore I could hear whispers, taunting me. For 3 days, the storm raged. 3 days of no sleep, of constant vigilance, of fighting against the elements and my own fracturing psyche. When it finally passed, I was a shell of myself. My beard had grown wild, my eyes sunken and bloodshot. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten. In the aftermath, I tried to radio for help, to request an early supply run. But the communication system remained stubbornly silent. Was it broken? Or was someone deliberately ignoring my calls? As my food supplies dwindled, so did my sanity. I began to see things, shadows moving at the corner of my vision, faces peering in through windows. I knew, logically, that it was impossible. The lighthouse stood on a sheer cliff. There was nowhere for anyone to stand outside those high windows. But logic had long since abandoned me. I started talking to the lighthouse itself. In my delirious state, I became convinced that it was alive, that it needed to be appeased. The constant groaning of metal and wood in the wind became its voice, demanding sacrifice. The irony isn't lost on me. I came to this godforsaken rock to escape the chaos of my old life, to find some peace and quiet. Now, the silence is deafening, and I'd give anything for the familiar hum of office chatter or the honking of impatient drivers stuck in rush-hour traffic. It wasn't always like this. When I first arrived at the lighthouse, I was filled with a sense of purpose and excitement. The stark beauty of the Maine coastline, with its craggy cliffs and churning waves, felt like a balm to my frayed nerves. After my very public meltdown at work, screaming at my boss in front of the entire office and hurling my laptop out the window, this isolated post seemed like the perfect place to regroup and rebuild. For the first few weeks, I threw myself into my duties with gusto. I meticulously maintained the light, ensuring its powerful beam cut through the thickest fog. I logged passing ships with precision, feeling a sense of connection to the outside world with each vessel that appeared on the horizon. Even the constant upkeep of this old, creaky structure gave me a sense of accomplishment. But as the days stretched into weeks, the novelty wore off. The beauty I once saw in the landscape turned ominous. The crashing waves became a constant, maddening rhythm. The cries of seagulls transformed from soothing background noise to shrill, accusing screams. I found myself talking more and more, desperate to fill the silence. At first, it was just muttering to myself as I went about my tasks. Then I graduated to full-blown conversations with the old coffee maker in the kitchen, apologizing to it when the power flickered and interrupted its brewing cycle. Sleep became elusive. The irregular schedule required to maintain the light played havoc with my circadian rhythm. When I did manage to drift off, my dreams were vivid and unsettling. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I'd heard footsteps on the stairs or whispers just outside my door. Rationally, I knew it was just the wind or the old building settling. But in those dark hours before dawn, rationality seemed as distant as the mainland. I started double-checking the locks, peering out windows, searching for, what? An intruder? A ghost? Or maybe just a sign that I wasn't completely alone in this watery prison of my own making. Standing at the top of the lighthouse, razor in hand, I was ready to offer the only thing I had left myself. The beam of light swept across the turbulent sea, and in its reflection, I saw my own madness staring back at me. But then, cutting through the fog of my mind, came an unfamiliar sound. A helicopter. Its searchlight pierced the gloom, sweeping across the island. For a moment, I was torn between relief and the overwhelming urge to complete my mission. Suddenly, the old radio crackled to life. A voice, tinny but clear, broke through. "Caldwell, do you copy? We've been trying to reach you for weeks." Reality came crashing back. There was never anyone else here. No entity to appease. Just me, alone with my fractured mind. As the helicopter landed, I sank to my knees, the razor clattering to the floor. They tell me I'm safe now, back in the real world. The doctors say it was severe isolation-induced psychosis that with time and therapy, I'll recover. But I can't shake this feeling that something's not right. Sometimes, I catch glimpses of the lighthouse and reflections, hear the foghorn in the distance. The other day, I swear I saw that judgmental seagull perched outside my hospital window. When I blinked, it was gone. Am I truly healing, or is this just another layer of delusion? Deep down, I wonder, did I ever really leave that island? Or am I still there, trapped in a never-ending nightmare of my own making? The red light on my camera blinked steadily, a digital heartbeat in the eerie quiet of my apartment. 12 hours into my 48-hour live stream, and I was down to one viewer. Just one. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting at the username. "Your last follower." A chill ran down my spine as a message popped up. "I see you, Zoe. Now, let's play a game." My fingers flew to end the stream, but the app wouldn't close. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. The show must go on. That's when I realized I wasn't just streaming anymore. I was trapped. My hands shook as I tried to force quit the streaming app. Nothing worked. I grabbed my laptop, figuring I could at least message the friend for help. But it was like my devices had a mind of their own, all locked into this nightmarish broadcast. "Come on, Zoe. Don't leave us hanging," the chat pinged. I felt my chest tighten. Who are you? I typed back, my fingers slipping on the keys. How do you know my name? I know everything about you, Zoe Chen. 28 years old. Aspiring influencer. Living alone in apartment 4B. You really should change the password on your Wi-Fi. My stomach lurched. I'd never mentioned my apartment number online. Never. I tried to keep my voice steady as I addressed the camera. Look, this isn't funny. I'm ending the stream now. But we're just getting started, came the reply. Why don't you give us a tour of your lovely home? I glanced around my cluttered studio apartment. Ring lights and cameras everywhere, clothes strewn about. Evidence of a life lived online, curated for strangers' approval. No, I said firmly. I'm done. The lights in my apartment flickered, and I jumped. When they stabilized, I saw a new message, wrong answer. Let's try again. Show us your bedroom, Zoe. My throat went dry. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some sick prank, right? Maybe a hacker messing with my stream. But how did they control my lights? I stood up, my legs wobbly. I'm calling the police, I announced, reaching for my phone. The screen lit up before I touched it, displaying a text from an unknown number. I wouldn't do that if I were you. I dropped the phone like it was on fire. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. I could leave, get help from a neighbor. But as I approached the door, I heard an ominous click. With trembling fingers, I tried the handle. Locked. Somehow, they'd engaged the smart lock I'd installed last month. Now, Zoe, the chat dinged. Leaving so soon? We're just getting to know each other. I leaned against the door, sliding down to the floor. The cameras stared at me, their red lights blinking steadily. Judging. Waiting. What had I gotten myself into? Hours blurred together as I sat huddled on my couch, the glow of screens casting eerie shadows across my apartment. Sleep deprivation gnawed at my sanity, but I couldn't let my guard down. Not with your last follower watching my every move. You look tired, Zoe, the chat pinged. Why don't you make some coffee? I know where you keep it. Top shelf, left cabinet. I flinched. How could they possibly know that? Desperate for a distraction, I shuffled to the kitchen, my legs stiff from sitting for so long. As I reached for the coffee, a loud thud from the bedroom made me jump. What was that? I called out, my voice hoarse. Why don't you go check? Came the reply. My heart pounded as I inched towards the bedroom. The door creaked open, revealing nothing. Just my messy bed and piles of laundry. I let out a shaky breath. Disappointing, the chat buzzed. I expected more of a reaction. Let's try something else. Suddenly, my phone blared with an incoming video call. The caller ID showed my mom's face. Mom? I answered, hope rising in my chest. But instead of my mother's comforting voice, I heard distorted, garbled sounds. The video showed a dark, unfamiliar room. Then, a masked figure appeared, holding up a sign, say exactly what I tell you, or else. Bile rose in my throat. What do you want? I whispered. Tell your lovely viewers about the incident from your childhood. You know the one. I felt the blood drain from my face. How could they know about that? I'd never told anyone. With a trembling voice, I recounted the story to the camera. Each word felt like a betrayal, exposing a part of myself I'd kept hidden for years. Good girl, the chat pinged as I finished. Now, let's really have some fun. The lights in my apartment began to flicker rapidly, almost strobing. In the chaotic flashes, I caught glimpses of something that made my blood run cold, a shadowy figure, darting from corner to corner. Stop it! I screamed, covering my eyes. When I looked up, the lights had stabilized. But now, my laptop screen showed a new window, a live security camera feed of my apartment building's hallway. And there, approaching my door, was a hooded figure. My heart threatened to burst from my chest as I watched the figure on the screen raise a hand to knock. The sound echoed through my apartment, perfectly synced with the video feed. "Open the door, Zoe," the chat demanded. Paralyzed with fear, I couldn't move. The knocking grew more insistent. Suddenly, the power cut out, plunging me into darkness. My phone screen glowed ominously, the stream still running. "I told you to open the door," a voice said from behind me. I whirled around, a scream caught in my throat. In the dim light, I saw a familiar face. My neighbor, Ted, stood there, phone in hand, the "Your Last Follower" chat visible on his screen. "Surprise," he said with a twisted smile. "I've always been your biggest fan, Zoe. And now, we're going to create the most viral video of all time." The next few hours were a blur of terror and confusion. When the police finally arrived, responding to a noise complaint, they found me alone in my apartment, babbling incoherently about live streams and stalkers. Ted was nowhere to be found. My devices showed no trace of Your Last Follower or the stream. As I sit here now, trying to piece together what happened, I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched. Sometimes, I catch a glimpse of a blinking light in the corner of my eye. And every night, my phone pings with one message: "Ready for the sequel?" The moment I stepped into my childhood home, I knew something was off. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence. As I climbed the creaking stairs to my old room, a chill ran down my spine. There, on my bed, lay a weathered notebook I'd never seen before. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing page after page of meticulous observations about me, my family, our daily routines. The final entry, dated today, simply read, "He's here. Time to introduce myself." The sound of footsteps echoed from downstairs, and I realized with horror I wasn't alone. It all started when I agreed to house sit for my parents. They were heading off on a second honeymoon, leaving me alone in the house where I'd grown up. As I pulled into the driveway, the familiar sight of the old Victorian-style home brought back a flood of memories, not all of them pleasant. I lugged my duffel bag up to my old room, which Mom had converted into a guest room after I left for college. The pale blue walls were now a neutral beige, but the ancient oak wardrobe still loomed in the corner. I couldn't help but smile, remembering how I used to imagine it was a portal to another world, or worse, a hiding place for monsters. "Grow up, Ethan," I muttered to myself, shaking off the childish thoughts. I spent the afternoon reacquainting myself with the house, noting the little changes my parents had made over the years. The kitchen had new countertops, and Dad had finally fixed that squeaky step on the stairs. As evening approached, I settled onto the couch with a microwave dinner and flicked on the TV. The local news was on, and I nearly choked on my pasta when I saw the headline, "Dangerous Convict Escapes from Millhaven Correctional Center." The newscaster's voice filled the suddenly too quiet living room. "Marcus Reeves, convicted of armed robbery and assault, escaped during a prisoner transfer this afternoon. Authorities warn that Reeves is considered extremely dangerous. Residents in the greater Kingston area are advised to lock their doors and report any suspicious activity immediately." A chill ran down my spine as they showed a mugshot of Reeves. His face was all hard angles and scars, with eyes that seemed to stare right through the screen. I quickly changed the channel, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. As night fell, the house seemed to grow larger and emptier. Every creak and groan of the old structure set my nerves on edge. I found myself double-checking the locks on the doors and windows, feeling slightly foolish but unable to shake my anxiety. I tried calling my parents to let them know I'd arrived safely, but the call went straight to voicemail. They're probably just enjoying their vacation, I reasoned, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. As I prepared for bed, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. The shadows in the corners of my room seemed deeper than usual, and the silence of the house pressed in on me from all sides. I woke with a start, heart racing. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed an eerie 3:17 a.m. Something had pulled me from sleep, but what? I strained my ears, listening intently. There was again a soft thud from downstairs. "It's probably just the house settling," I whispered to myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I grabbed my phone, using it as a makeshift flashlight as I crept down the stairs. The old wood creaked under my feet, each sound amplified in the silence of the night. As I reached the bottom, a cool breeze hit my face. My blood ran cold as I realized the source of the kitchen window was wide open. I was sure I'd closed and locked it earlier. Heart pounding, I moved through the house, checking each room. Nothing seemed out of place, but an overwhelming sense of wrongness permeated the air. As I returned to the kitchen to close the window, I noticed something that made my stomach lurch: muddy footprints on the linoleum floor. They weren't mine. I fumbled with my phone, trying to call 911, but to my horror, there was no signal. The landline was dead too. Panic rising in my throat, I ran to the front door, only to find it wouldn't budge. Someone had locked it from the outside. I was trapped. A floorboard creaked upstairs, and I froze. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The intruder was still in the house. And worse, they'd been here for days, watching, waiting. I spotted a knife block on the kitchen counter and grabbed the largest one, its weight oddly comforting in my trembling hand. As I edged towards the stairs, the light suddenly went out, plunging the house into darkness. In the pitch black, every sound became a threat. The tick of the grandfather clock, the hum of the refrigerator, my own ragged breathing, all seemed to conspire against me, masking the movements of the intruder. I made my way up the stairs, each step an agony of suspense. As I reached the landing, a shadow moved at the end of the hallway. My childhood bedroom door slowly creaked open. With my heart in my throat, I inched forward, knife raised. The bedroom was dark, but I could make out a hulking figure standing by the window. This was at the moment of truth. I lunged forward, adrenaline coursing through my veins. But as I flicked on the light switch, the scene before me was not what I expected. The escaped convict, Marcus Reeves, stood there, his scarred face a mask of fear and desperation. "Please," he whispered, raising his hands in surrender. "I just needed a place to hide. I never meant to scare you." In that moment, I realized the true horror wasn't the monster under the bed or the bogeyman in the closet. It was the broken man standing before me, a victim of circumstance as much as I was a victim of fear. As we stood there, locked in a tableau of mutual terror, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Someone had seen the open window, the signs of intrusion. Help was coming, but the nightmare was far from over. As the police lights flashed outside and the officers led Marcus away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd confronted something more than just an intruder. I'd faced my deepest childhood fears and found that the line between monster and man was blurrier than I'd ever imagined. As I watched the patrol car drive away, I wondered, who was the real bogeyman in this story? And more disturbingly, how many other monsters were out there, hiding in plain sight, born from desperation rather than malice? Maybe the real horror wasn't what lurked in the shadows, but what society had created in the light. The smell hit me first. Cloying sweetness mixed with something metallic, like pennies left in the sun. I froze in the doorway of Aiden's pristine kitchen, my overnight bag slipping from my shoulder. "Everything okay, babe?" He called from upstairs. My eyes darted to the knife block. One was missing. A red droplet glistened on the counter's edge. This wasn't how our quarantine romance was supposed to start. As Aiden's footsteps approached, I realized with gut-wrenching clarity I'd locked myself in with a stranger, and the world outside had just shut down. The day I met Aiden feels like a lifetime ago. There I was, grabbing my last latte before the world shut down, when he walked into the coffee shop. Tall, with a crooked smile that made my heart skip, he asked if the seat across from me was taken. We got to talking, and suddenly, the looming lockdown didn't seem so daunting. We exchanged numbers, texting constantly as the city ground to a halt. When Aiden suggested we quarantine together at his place, it felt like a rom-com dream come true. "It'll be an adventure," he'd said, his voice warm through the phone. Just the two of us, getting to know each other without the world's distractions. I should have known better. Should have listened to that nagging voice in the back of my head when he insisted on picking up my things himself. "It's safer this way, Zoe," he'd explained. "We don't want to risk exposure, do we?" His concern seemed sweet at the time. The first red flag came when we arrived at his house. It was beautiful, a spacious two-story in a quiet suburb, but the multiple locks on the front door gave me pause. "Can't be too careful these days," Aiden said with a wink as he ushered me inside. He took my phone almost immediately, claiming he needed to disinfect it. When he returned it hours later, something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I was too distracted by the house, by him, by the strangeness of our situation. The rules started small. No loud noises after 8 p.m. Lights out by 10. "We need to keep a routine," Aiden explained, always so reasonable. But soon, it was more. He wanted to know who I was texting, what websites I visited. "Just looking out for our bubble," he'd say, peering over my shoulder. My attempts to video call friends always seemed to coincide with Wi-Fi issues or Aiden needing help with something urgent. Isolation crept in, not just from the world, but from my own life. One night, searching for an extra blanket, I found a closet filled with women's clothing. None of it mine, none of it my size. When I asked Aiden about it, his eyes hardened for a split second before he laughed it off. "Oh, those are my sisters. She stores stuff here sometimes." I nodded, smiling weakly, but my stomach churned. Aiden had told me he was an only child. As the days dragged on, the house felt less like a romantic getaway and more like a prison. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of Aiden's hushed voice. "The package in the basement is secure," he'd whisper into his phone. No problems. She doesn't suspect a thing." My heart would race, wondering if he was talking about me. But then, who was in the basement? I'd hear thuds and muffled sounds from below, but Aiden always had an explanation. "Old pipes," he'd say. "This house has character." One afternoon, while Aiden was busy in his study, I noticed a neighbor waving frantically at me through the kitchen window. Before I could react, Aiden appeared out of nowhere, yanking the curtains shut. "Nosy people," he muttered, always trying to intrude on others' privacy. I knew I had to leave, but how? My car keys had vanished, and Aiden insisted on doing all the grocery runs himself. "It's safer this way," he'd remind me, that once charming smile now sending chills down my spine. Desperate, I feigned illness one day, hoping to buy myself some time to search the house while Aiden was distracted. As I rifled through drawers and cabinets, my hands shaking, I stumbled upon a hidden phone. The screen lit up with frantic messages from unknown numbers. "Please help us. We're trapped. Don't trust him." My blood ran cold as a news alert popped up on the phone. 3 women reported missing in the area over the past month. I recognized one of them. Her photo matched the clothes I'd found in that closet. Everything clicked into place. The basement noises, the package, the locked doors. I wasn't just trapped in quarantine, I was living with a predator. Heart pounding, I crept down the basement stairs, the hidden phone clutched in my trembling hand. The muffled sounds grew louder. I reached for the light switch, and the room flooded with harsh fluorescent light. A scream caught in my throat. The basement was a makeshift prison. A young woman, bound and gagged, stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. But she wasn't alone. 2 other women huddled in the corner, all wearing clothes I'd seen upstairs. Quite a collection, isn't it? Aiden's voice came from behind me. I whirled around, seeing not the charming man I thought I knew, but a monster wearing a familiar face. "Don't worry, Zoe," he said, advancing slowly, "you'll fit right in. After all, we're all quarantining together, aren't we?" The sirens grew louder, then cut off abruptly. Shouts and pounding footsteps echoed from upstairs. Aiden's face contorted with rage as he lunged for me. In the chaos that followed the rush of police, the crying women, the flash of handcuffs, one question kept repeating in my mind. How many others were out there, trapped with monsters masquerading as saviors? As I huddled under a shock blanket, watching Aiden being led away, I realized, sometimes, the real horror isn't being alone, it's the company you keep. Like the story? Hit like and subscribe. See you in the next story popping up on your screen at this exact moment.